Hi, Chanel. Hi, Bruce. Hi, Jody.
Hi, Debbie. How are you?
Good. I'm sorry, I'm going to put my video on in just a moment. I'm just having a few bites of food before we get started.
How are you, Jody?
Hi, Bruce. How are you?
Very well, thanks. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you.
Hey, Jim.
Hello.
You know, they could have used you in Washington this past week with the elections for the speaker.
Right.
I was happy to see them suffer.
It was interesting, the commentary by the reporters that the parliamentarians didn't have any experience with this kind of situation after 100 years. So they kind of had to make it up as they went along. So the default is Robert's rules, right?
Probably.
Yeah.
But basically, you know, their rules said nothing happens until you elect a speaker. And so this person, who I believe wasn't even a representative, had to keep on running things until they finally elected a speaker.
Right. Yeah, which is, we'll see what happens next.
Right.
Very right.
That's true. Yeah. So where is, oh, there she, I see our glorious leader, or I see her name in the
Hey.
outline.
Sorry. I'm getting these already getting low system resources affecting my computer. So I was just trying to do a quick closing a bunch of stuff. Okay.
Hey, Maria.
Hello, Maria.
Okay. All right, sorry, I'm just gonna give another 2 minutes to see if we can pick up Leo.
Hey Debbie, good evening, everyone.
Oh, you are. Perfect
Yeah, I'm here. I'm
timing.
sorry. Just got slid right in.
See? You said his name and there he was.
That's the power I have.
The New Year magic.
I see Wayne is with us. Imagine that.
Yes, good evening, and how are you?
I am fine. How are you, Wayne?
Doing fine, doing fine.
All right, just jotting down names and all that, and we'll call to order in just a moment. Hey, Lyle.
Ah, Lyle's name appears.
Okay. It is 7:06. I'd like to call. Thanks, Chanel. The January 9th, 2023 TNT meeting to order. My name is Debbie Nabavian. I chair this committee, and I'd like to introduce the rest of the committee members and CB12 board members that are joining us tonight. So from the committee, we have Assistant Chair Leo Jimenez. We have Jim Berlin, Bruce Robertson, and I'd like to introduce our committee's newest member, but not unknown to the committee in any way, Jody Herson. Welcome, Jody. I was so pleased to hear. I didn't know until pretty recently that I guess you applied, and had you filled a seat that had become vacant, like between terms?
Yeah, I think Sean was looking for somebody and he reached out, and I think I'm here for 6 months till May.
All right.
And
Well,
then supposedly, I think I'm supposed to reapply.
Right. Well,
So
we're
I
so
think I'm
happy.
filling some spot on the board, but I don't know where the spot is really.
Right.
I don't know who left.
Yeah, there's always things happen.
But I'm
over
happy
time.
to be on this one.
Yeah, exactly. I keep saying, like, you were, you were so engaged over a long period of time, and I have to say I have a lot of respect for the fact that you stuck with what you stuck with. Some of us might have just said, like, all right.
Well, I don't know what I'm in for, and I don't know, anything about this. So it was good to I asked for you guys because I sort of felt like I at least knew some of you a little bit. So
No,
I'm happy to be here.
no, and we're happy to have you. Tonight we have two CB12 board members in addition to the committee members, Maria Luna and Wayne Benjamin. Thank you for joining us tonight.
Good evening.
I guess, and Lyle Blackwood here. Thanks for joining us, Lyle, from DOT. This isn't maybe the most typical night because it is a fairly quiet night for us. But sometimes that's not a bad thing. And so hopefully we'll have a little time just to speak about sort of any goals for the committee over this sort of second half of the season or last 2/3 of the season, what have you. So I have a few updates, and then I have there was this loading zone item that I want to talk a bit about in a letter that was presented, that was sent to us by DOT, as well as bring up another letter that had come a little while ago. And hey, Mary, that I just somehow didn't get presented to you guys, and I think I was sort of meant to do it a million times and then kept forgetting. But sort of is somewhat similar in terms of DOT initiatives that relate to the streets plan that we spent time with about a year ago. But first, I just wanted to, and I'm sorry, I'm just going to jump onto my email to read it out. We had two updates that came in at the end of the day from the MTA. So while I don't have confirmation, and I'm wondering if maybe Marshall Vanderpool can get promoted, because I may ask him to confirm. What I haven't had confirmed is, did the Dyckman elevator, to make that Dyckman 1 train station fully accessible, did that open in December before year end? Because I'm feeling maybe it didn't. And then I'm just gonna read off. So I have been in discussions with the MTA about what can they say about the 181st escalator, and it's been a lot of things that they couldn't let me say more publicly, but we just received, the MTA is pleased that the escalator work at the 181st Street 8th train station is almost complete and will still reopen in the first quarter of 2022. However, due to unforeseen delays, including supply chain issues, we are working to restore escalator service in March rather than February. At this time, there are no impacts to the scheduled ADA elevator installation work taking place at the station concurrently. What I understand from shaking down some of the workers at the site is that there have been a series of there's always negative discoveries when you're going into such old infrastructure, but I think most of them related to the electrical. And then I think there was one incident related to some of the new equipment. There was sort of in storage or put aside to obviously be installed, and somebody broke in and some of that needed to be replaced. So when they say supply chain, I think there really were some issues of things that they discovered and they needed to get a new this or a new that. And then obviously that just puts us in the same issues that we've observed over the past 2 years. But it's scheduled for February. Now it's been delayed to sometime in March. You're not giving a specific date, but that's that story. And they are also announcing that beginning January 23rd, the MTA will be beginning stairwell repair work at the Dyckman Street Station stairwell located on the southwest side of Broadway and Riverside Drive. It will be closed 24/7. They'll be working there between 7 a.m. and 5 p.m. each day. And that's a complete stairwell demolition and refurbishment. The work is slated for completion by the end of April. That does leave 2 other station stairwells that are not affected and will be open obviously throughout the project duration. So that's that. And before we get to the DOT information, I just one thing that I talked about I guess last month was, I'd like just to maybe, and I don't know, maybe like 3 people share it and rotate it. So like once a quarter you cover it, but just to take a quick look up before the meeting on Crash Mapper to just share with the committee what the last month available data says for CB12 and incidents on our streets. So where there have been injuries, etc. And hopefully then that'll give us a more granular feel for where the action is. Although, you know, I know everybody has a pretty good feel about where our sort of worst areas are. I mean, not that these numbers are up yet on the system, but I assume people saw that like a car went speeding, hit a double parked car or a car that was loaded. Anyway, a car went into the Inwood Bar and Grill, shattered windows. So like 22 people were injured. There might have been at least 2 people with broken bones. Most of it, thankfully, was like more like, I think, not quite as serious as broken bones. Yeah, I don't even know what to say. There was like some sense that there was an altercation in the car and it went like speeding. That's obviously a super congested area. But the car ended up in the restaurant, you know, through the restaurant window. So that sounds pretty horrifying. So I think what I'm gonna wanna do is maybe I could send you guys a schedule. And again, if people don't mind, you know, I'll just sort of assign everybody a rotation, and then just in the beginning of the meeting, we can take 2 minutes and go over that. And then I'll send the link to Crash Mapper and all of that. Allegra Legrand has done more like, you know, some programming to try to, and Allegra, I'm sorry, I didn't have time. I saw your note right before the meeting, so I haven't had time to absorb it, and I will. But because there's always a little bit of difference between Crash Mapper, which I think is driven more by NYPD, and the numbers that DOT has. She's sort of figured out how we might be able to like work through some of these details, but I think Allegra just give me a chance to read through at some point after this meeting, and then figure out how we might integrate the more detailed work that you have. Again, I'm more focused on not the sort of exact, but just, again, that we as committee members have a good sense of what's happening on the streets and where it's happening, and trends. Because obviously a lot of the initiatives that we see, you know, do relate, you know, Vision Zero, it is all about making our streets safer. With that, so I'm sorry, Marshall, do you know about the Dyckman 1 train and if that elevator work has completed? Just unmute. Yeah, perfect.
All right. Good evening, everybody. No, I can't say I know that for a fact. I'll be honest, I usually walk over to take the A train. Most of my travels work for me like that. I mean, the last time I was at that station was probably New Year's Eve morning, coming home from some partying, and that the only elevator that's operating at that station right now is for the downtown platform. Otherwise, I mean, I could check it out, and I guess
No, don't worry about it.
I'm not immediately aware of that.
Right, but it
So-
sounds like if you were going through there on New Year's, it sounds like they didn't make the December 2023 date. And anyway, so I'll let people know when I hear something. I certainly ask them, but I'll I'll actually be at the MTA on Thursday, so maybe I can get some better info when I'm there. So and Lyle, I'll let you jump in just after I introduce this. So from time to time, we get notice from DOT when they take a particular action, like installing a speed bump, et cetera, et cetera. And one thing that we got recently, which I just emailed to people, but what I'll do is I'll put it up on the screen, is we just got notice about an initiative relating to loading zones, which, as people might remember from like when we looked at the 5-year streets plan and vision, was sort of touching upon wanting to, with the increase in e-commerce deliveries, in particular, and grocery deliveries and all of that, there's so much congestion that just relates to delivery trucks, et cetera. And the city has been looking at more innovative ways to getting this staggering volume of deliveries to people in a more efficient manner. So, and what I had forgotten was, is that it's actually like local law. And so so we received, it's an update, and I'm just going to paraphrase some of this for the benefit of the attendees. But DOT wrote to say they're writing for an update on the progress with respect to local law 168 of 2021. As a reminder, this bill requires DOT to create a public methodology for determining where loading zones are necessary to enhance safety and reduce traffic congestion. DOT is required to create at least 5 loading zones annually in each neighborhood tabulation area that meets the methodology, provided that no fewer than 500 new loading zones are created citywide annually this year and the next 2 years. By January 1st, 2023, DOT is required to report on its progress toward implementing these loading zones and publicly post the location of all loading zones citywide. The term loading zone includes neighborhood loading zones, truck loading only zones, and commercial metered parking. For CB12, and again, I'll share my screen and put this up. Our neighborhood loading zones will be installed on West 159th Street, roughly in front of 575 West 159. That's between Broadway and Amsterdam. West 158th, roughly in front of 468 West 158th Street, South Side, between St. Nicholas and Edgecombe. West 177th, between Wadsworth and St. Nick, roughly in front of 609 West 177. And last, Riverside Drive, West 160th Street, between West 160th and West 158th, west side of the street, in front of 861 Riverside Drive. I mean, it's interesting to me because that's obviously 158, 159, 160 roughly. And then 177. So I don't know, have they not gotten to Inwood yet? Or, this is just sort of the first thing we're hearing about. Lyle, while I pull that up so people can sort of see it visually, the list. Can you speak at all to the loading zone initiative? I don't mean to put you on the spot. I know we didn't speak beforehand.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Okay. Hi, everyone. Lyle Blacker from DOT. Happy New Year. In regards to the neighborhood loading zones, yeah, we're getting some information as it comes in as well. So, as you know, the letters were sent out to all community boards citywide. This is a citywide initiative. As Debbie mentioned, The city council mandated DOT to come up with a bunch of loading zones citywide. So it's not just CB12 that's being impacted. It's literally every community board pretty much around the city. Ideally, the just behind loading zones, we've gotten several requests over the years from residents seeing if it would be something that DOT would be able to possibly pursue. I think Debbie pretty much mentioned a couple of the reasons why, primarily in regards to e-commerce. As you know, spaces are, well, double parking is a big issue in neighborhoods throughout the city. One of the things that DOT is looking to do, ideally, is to repurpose curbside space in order to allow for easier traffic flow throughout neighborhoods. Neighborhood loading zones ideally would be something that would help. As you know, and I'm sure you've seen around the neighborhood, UPS trucks, FedEx trucks, other delivery trucks tend to double park and block traffic, which causes untold issues throughout the neighborhood and delays. This initiative ideally would be allowing curbside access to those vehicles so that they would be able to have direct access to the sidewalk, and in turn should be able to free up that double parking so that through traffic can continue and traffic can flow. Ideally, these installations will start in the spring, so around February, March. For now, these are the 4 locations within CB12. I'm not sure if there are going to be any added within the district, but for the time being, these are the 4 within the community board. Basically, the locations were chosen based on community feedback we've received through our website. And there are other locations throughout the city that meet the criteria for high demand and high probability for double parking or any safety issues, such as high density residential locations, narrow streets, or locations with existing bike lanes or bus routes. The list that we have that's out currently for the city is ideally the list that we have to meet the requirements for 2022. Pending any feedback that's received from the community boards, we're making the rounds now, trying to get feedback from the boards, positive or negative, that we can take back to our colleagues for their review. There will probably be some additional locations identified for 2023 later on this year. If there are any locations within CB12, absolutely we'll let you know. Usually in each location, 2 parking spaces will be repurposed for this initiative, located either at the end of the block or adjacent to a hydrant in order to avoid taking up additional space where possible. So ideally, DOT, like I said, looks at this more as, I guess repurposing car space, or curb space, I should say, ideally to alleviate traffic congestion citywide. We are looking for feedback as far as other locations that might be possibilities throughout community board citywide. So if this is an initiative that you support, or you feel that it's something that can be utilized elsewhere, by all means, you can let us know, and we can add that to a list for future consideration. And just one thing, yes, to highlight, this was something that, again, was mandated by the city council. So again, we're pretty much, I don't want to say your hands are tied, but they kind of are. So, these, like I said, we have a list of locations. Like I said, it's not just in the CB12, but, all throughout Northern Manhattan, all throughout the borough, and all throughout the city. So 4, I would say, was on the lower end in regards to, the number of loading zones per community board. But again, like I said, we'll take suggestions as to any other locations that you might feel might be feasible. And I can definitely pass that back. But any information that you have, any questions, concerns, comments, I can definitely pass that back over to my colleagues for their review. And we can get responses one way or the other as far as, any concerns you might have over certain locations, any suggestions, any general feedback, that sort of thing. So again, the conversation is always ongoing. But yes, we did send out that letter a few weeks ago, and we will be moving forward ideally in the springtime, probably I'd say late February, early March, more or less.
Well, we now have a fair amount of people from the 150s. So I'm gonna go through committee members, and then if any of our other CB12 attendees, and then move on to, I know we have some questions within the attendee pool as well, starting with Bruce.
Yeah, I know Jody's got her hand up, so she's probably gonna mention something about Riverside Drive, West 160 at 861. I think that's her initiative, and I congratulate her on getting that accomplished, because we had talked about it 2 years ago. And I think that's what's going on, right, Jody?
Yeah, Bruce, I do. I'm just interested in where we are with that, because I know that Sean's been working with us. We now have our sidewalk completely redone from 160 to 165. But the real problem that we have, which has been addressed before, is the it's a narrow one-way strip of roadway that runs from 158 to 165, and we do not have, it's almost a half a mile long, and we do not have one single loading zone along this stretch of roadway. And every large truck, every large car, everybody parks on the sidewalk to unload, and it's really dangerous.
So would this alleviate that problem?
If we had, I honestly think we need 4 loading zones along this stretch of roadway in order to, it will alleviate it. It won't get rid of it. But I think it's necessary because I just don't know how we can continue to function safely up here with all the trucks and all the cars parking on the sidewalk, including me. The only way I can unload my groceries is to park on the sidewalk. So I guess my suggestion is, or my recommendation is, could DOT take a look at this stretch of roadway from 158 to 165?
Yeah, we can. If you have specific locations in mind.
I do. I actually have them right here for you.
Oh, wonderful. I'll take them down.
Can I give them to you? I think a loading zone at 838 Riverside Drive would be great, right before the alcove where everybody sits during the summer months and crosses the street all the time when you have large trucks parked just below the alcove. Really dangerous. So 838, 870, which is right before the stairs at 160, where everybody pops up to do their groceries on Broadway. It's a major thoroughfare. Major passing area for people for groceries from Lower Riverside. 894, just before Dylan's grocery store, where everybody sits, called the Birdhouse. Those are the 3 main areas that I would focus on. If I could get one up by the Lily Brown Playground, I'd love that too, which would be 910.
Okay, I'm taking these down, but if you want to send me an email just so you can have it more formal, you can put it over to, and I can pass that on to my colleagues if that works for you.
And how would I get your email, Lyle?
If the chat is available, I can put it in the chat.
I don't think you're going to be able to get in there. I will get that to you, Jody.
Yeah,
Okay,
Debbie doesn't
Debbie.
have my information.
Yeah, no problem.
Thanks, everybody. That's it.
Okay. Sorry, I'm just gonna stop share for a moment. Lyle, just built on Jody's issue of that whole Riverside Drive. Do you call it upper roadway, Jody?
I think people call it all different kinds of things. So I call it everything. I think the way they define it in the road signs now is it's Riverside Drive East. And then where the 861 Riverside, where they are putting one in, is referred to as Riverside Drive West because it's more west.
Yeah,
so I think we're actually Riverside Drive East.
I sort of see the upper roadway, that section that Jody has done advocacy for, Lyle, as being a pretty good match to the upper, like the upper section of Riverside in the high 90s. And I know some things were done there. So at another point, when we're not speaking solely about the loading zones, I guess my question would be, and again, I understand there's some changes made, but there are some I think that are still out there, is that, does that provide some template for what might be opportunities to look at for 158 to 165 that were utilized in that section in the 90s, in the West 90s. All right. Let me, Maria. Oh, yeah, just unmute. Let me see if I can. There you go.
Okay, thank you. I'm concerned about the A61 Riverside site. Now, is that going to be on Riverside Drive or is going to be on the 160 side of the street? How does that work?
It's on the west side of Riverside Drive in front of 861.
Okay,
You
so will
a loading
will
zone for that address.
okay, will that conflict with the when you drive up Riverside Drive going north, you can make a right turn on that particular street? Would that be interfering with that whatever it is that they're going to do? Were they going to do this what do they call it? The docking area.
I mean, it's essentially removing two parking.
You know,
How would that affect the turn? What do you?
Right. Now, how does the docking area works? How much space is needed or anything else?
Well,
Why
I said
do-
it's about 2 parking spots, but
Mhm.
Lyle, what is it in a neighborhood loading zone just means? Say what that means.
Well, ideally, it would pretty much be signage that's installed along the curb. So, like how you see no standing signage around the city, there would be particular signage set aside for the neighborhood loading zone along the curb. So the sign would be on the sidewalk, away from through traffic, along the curb. So, approximately 2 spaces would be taken up along the curb on that portion of Riverside. So delivery trucks and other vehicles can use that curbside space in order to offload any goods. So that way, no double parking along that stretch of Riverside. I know that pretty much once the UPS truck is there, the whole street is pretty much blocked off until it moves. So hopefully this should allow for those delivery trucks in order to allow to get along the curb a lot easier. So that way they can just have direct access to the sidewalk and hopefully keep traffic flowing.
Okay, Maria, you're muted again.
I'm sorry. Okay, that is my concern. When you're saying that we're going to be, you're going to put sign, so we're going to be losing few parking spots, right? But because on the Riverside side, there's only, it's very narrow. If you double park, you have to drive right on the curve by the wall.
Yeah, and that's exactly what we're trying to avoid. So by taking those parking spaces and giving those essentially to dedicate towards delivery trucks and other vehicles, we're trying to avoid cars having to go onto the sidewalk in order to either go around trucks or, that sort of thing. So hopefully there should be increased safety for pedestrians and vehicles. Now that there should be space that's dedicated for those delivery trucks.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you so much.
No problem.
Thanks, Maria. Allegra?
Hi. Yeah, so looking at those 4 sites, did you know that the closest site to my address is 2 miles away? I mean, not for nothing, but 3 of those 4 are south of the bridge. Actually, 177th is also south of the bridge. They're all south of the bridge. I
Yeah,
mean, the
this is
ones
the-
along in the 150s, that's practically the next community board down. So the loading zone is kind of moot for CB12. It's not really addressing most of the
All right,
neighborhood.
Allegra, why don't we focus on the positive? Do you have,
Suggestions? Yes, I
Yeah.
have suggestions. Let's see if, how does NYPD do it? Quadrants A, B, C, D? Let's see if we can get 1 in each quadrant as starter for the 34th. So
Yeah.
let's see if we can get
Well,
1
I
in,
mean, I think probably what is helpful, I mean, at this point, because
so
their
specific sites.
implementation
So-
is in front of what, like, buildings, and where are we really seeing the pressure of lots of delivery trucks and double parking? And so
So
that doesn't have-
Broadway, like you just mentioned, the big accident and crash there, like, although it was in front of Inwood Bar and Grill, that section of Broadway has insane amounts of double parking, because that's also where the PJ's Liquor is. So that section of Broadway could use some. Sections like of 207th could definitely use some. Dykeman Street, they kind of use the bike lanes, so Dykeman Street could use some. I don't know the Fort Washington and the hill parts as well, but maybe somebody who lives down there could have a suggestion. It just feels like, you know, although it's crowded around the bridge, it's crowded in the whole neighborhood. The loading zones, it would be nice to have those in a lot of neighborhoods.
Well, I'm going to interrupt you there. I think what we're talking about 2 different things. So one, again, if people think of things, I mean, my sense, and Lyle, tell me if I'm wrong about this, that this initiative is focused on the neighborhood loading zones and trying to address the congestion that's being caused by the numbers of deliveries to residences. And as,
Okay.
but the commercial
okay.
loadings, the
The
commercial
bike lanes
loading-
on Seaman then
no,
are
I'm
used as
talking-
loading zones.
But separately, as I understand it, DOT has separately initiatives around commercial loading zones for things like Broadway and our commercial strips, Dykeman, et cetera, et cetera. So there are loading zones on all of our commercial strips.
So
and
look, Debbie, I mean,
Allegra,
so
we're not back and forth.
specifically,
I'm just asking Lyle something right now. I'm not, so this is more
it's not a back and forth. It is an observation that there are no loading zones mentioned north of the George Washington Bridge
I know
in
Allegra,
any
but
residences.
I said that too. So we have an opportunity to maybe suggest some more. I get it. We are, and Lyle has said it too, it's light in CB12. It's only, it is important to the extent that we are surfacing ideas where we feel there might have been a rather urgent area, big building, big residence, et cetera, where this is a problem. The Riverside one was one we were tracking for a really long time because people just they just couldn't get around. So traffic would back up. One, Lyle, like that, am I right that this sort of commercial loading zone is a somewhat separate issue? And I guess I'm always curious about things like, you know, how is that going, especially because then that also has to take into account all these restaurant sheds, which are also on those commercial strips. But is it correct that these lists are really focused on when we do them in front of residences, the neighborhood ones?
Yeah, the neighborhood loading zones, you're right, are pretty much focused primarily on residential streets for now. Streets where we've gotten complaints of, you know, high trafficked areas as far as deliveries, you know, pickups and drop-offs, high rates of double parking, high rates of delivery trucks parking illegally in some instances. I've heard where there are UPS trucks that are parked in painted medians in the middle of a street, which is, you know, highly dangerous for both the driver and other vehicles. So this neighborhood loading zone focus is more so on residential neighborhoods, or sorry, residential areas throughout the city. But yes, we do have commercial loading zones on many of our major streets. So a few years ago, if I recall, we did have several commercial loading zones installed on both Broadway and St. Nicholas, in order to try to accommodate a lot of the stores that are there for the same reason, so that they could ideally have curbside access for their deliveries, to load and offload. So pretty much in this instance, yeah, we're doing this now for the residential portions of those neighborhoods, since we're seeing an uptick in issues concerning double parking and other traffic issues along those stretches. So like I said, this is the list for now. But like I said, any and all suggestions in all parts of the city, all parts of the community board, I can definitely take back to my colleagues for their review. As mentioned, there might be additional locations that will be revealed later on this year. But like I said, I can definitely take back any comments, any suggestions as far as specific locations, like say in front of an address or on a particular stretch. Commercial or residential, I'll take them all, and we can just pass them along, and we can see what we can do for it.
Okay, thank
Debbie,
you.
in that case, can I suggest Park Terrace anywhere? Because it's all one-way streets here, and loading zone or bus or whoever, it blocks off not just one or two buildings.
Yeah,
it blocks
no,
off
I
from
do.
Park Terrace.
Yeah, I was thinking the same, that it's really a problem of narrow streets. Like there's double parking on Seaman, but it doesn't tend to stop traffic. So that kind of example. So, but if you can think of any like particular addresses, just looking at the way they did their list, I think that would be helpful, but duly noted. So Park Terrace East, Park Terrace West, and those are also some sizable buildings. Brandon?
Hi.
Hi.
On a side note, I would actually also recommend Wadsworth Terrace as being investigated. I'm curious, how long has this program been around in the city? And what's two questions? How long has it been around? And is there any kind of studies or analysis of the program so far? And second question would be, as we're all probably familiar with, particularly uptown neighborhood, double parking is just rampant in general, as well as illegal parking. I'm curious, what is the enforcement mechanism, or is there increased cooperation or support with traffic enforcement agencies? Thank you.
No problem. Regarding this program in particular, at least as far as neighborhood loading zones, this is a brand new initiative. So there is no hard data at this time, at least not for Manhattan. I think that there are a smattering of locations in the outer boroughs, but I think this is the first time that we're going to be in the borough of Manhattan, with such a concentration of locations, at least here. As far as one thing I did want to mention, that I did forget, the loading zones will be in effect ideally during the day, and at night those spaces will be can be converted to residential parking. So there should be, trying to see if I can find the times. Ideally, typical, neighborhood loading zone hours would be from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. or from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. So in a sense, you're kind of getting the best of both worlds. So during the day, that would be dedicated curbside space for delivery trucks. And after, say, 6 p.m. or 7 p.m., that space will be given back to the community for residential parking. But as data comes in, at least for the borough of Manhattan, we can pass this information on to the community board. As far as enforcement, again, most of our programs or our projects, would be most beneficial with assistance from the local precincts as far as enforcement when it comes to ticketing and, towing of vehicles. I know that my colleagues have been speaking to local precincts just to give them a heads up as to what's coming. But ideally it's a collaborative effort between delivery drivers and the local precincts in order to make sure that those spaces are being used as they're intended.
Thanks, Lo.
No problem.
And then I guess I would say, Brandon, this program again related to local law 168, which is a 2021 law. But we have, the idea of a neighborhood loading zone, like after the changes on the Riverside Drive, like Bruce, God, how long has it been now? Two years? It sort of feel like it's on pandemic time, so I don't remember how many years it was. They implemented the safety changes and that was all well and, was like, oh, long time in the waiting. And then it got implemented and all of a sudden everybody's like, you can't get by the way something was built out. You couldn't get by one of the big residential buildings because there were always people like needed to load. And so pretty quickly DOT pulled 2 spots to create at least a little bit of relief. I'm sure it still gets backed up a lot. Wayne?
Yeah, actually, Debbie, I was going to mention that point exactly. And going back to the question of enforcement, just last week, I noticed that during the day when the loading zone should have been for a loading zone, you had cars parked there. So it's only effective if there is enforcement, because you're absolutely right. That median that was built took away a lane of traffic. And even as it was being built, the traffic backup issues became evident. And, DOT said it would calm down. It didn't. Having the loading zone helps. But if the loading zone becomes parking, then we're back to having only one lane of traffic and things back up. So enforcement is key.
One question, I guess, to ask, I have curiosity. Would you prefer, and this is just a general question to everyone, would you prefer if these neighborhood loading zones were 24 hours, or are you okay with that parking being given back to the residents after, say, 6 p.m. and 7 p.m. at night?
I'm going to take this on behalf of everybody. Not in the overnight. We need our parking in the overnight.
Okay.
It's mayhem out there. It's absolute mayhem.
Okay. Just wanted to make sure because, you could, okay. No problem.
Lyle, por favor. All right. So now this one is older and I guess I'm guessing that it's not necessarily an open item, but while I never presented, and this goes back to October, so don't yell at me, but it was after our October meeting, that amongst the various sort of innovative programs of DOT to get to that sort of relate to meeting climate change goals and of the city is like we'd seen a beta of like those like a parking spots with the electric charger, like the EV cars chargers. So similarly, DOT contacted us about what they call the car share program. So that's basically like a zip car kind of thing, which sometimes has spots in a private parking garage. So DOT launched the car share parking pilot program in June 2018 with Zipcar and Enterprise Car Share. And at that time, it was like 230 on-street spaces and 55 municipal parking facility spaces. The 2-year pilot averaged 24 trips per space per month with an average of 17 households per available vehicle per month. The pilot saw, I don't know how they measure this, pilot saw greenhouse gas emissions and vehicle miles traveled decline 7% and 6% respectively. Overall, New York City DOT views the pilot as a success and thus created a permanent program for providing car share parking spaces. So under that program, registered car share organizations, which includes Zipcar, Get Around, and I don't know how to say it, Trukit, apply for site-specific permits, which New York City DOT evaluates based on a clear set of criteria. The locations listed have met these citing criteria and will serve to provide dedicated curb space for car share parking. The list of preliminary approved sites is attached. So I will see if I can get that up, but that is 189th Street, closest to 600 West 189th, St. Nick Wadsworth, 158th, Amsterdam and St. Nick, roughly near 1975 Amsterdam Avenue, West 163rd, roughly close to 452 West 163rd Street, that's Amsterdam Edgecombe, and I'll try to get the rest up onto a screen share. I'm just looking into Inwood, Cooper, Thayer, Post. We have Cabrini between 180 and 181, Wadsworth between 183 and 184. So let me see if I can get that up on the share. So Lyle, is that happening? Like, is it too late to kind of comment, or is it like loading zone that we can still make suggestions? I know it's not quite the same thing, but
Yeah, time. I think there's still time for suggestions. I know that our car share folks have been looking for feedback for the past several months. I think there's still time for your 2 cents in, but I know that they want to move forward with these installations, I think in the spring as well. So just a quick just review as to the car share program. So a few years ago, as Debbie mentioned, there was a pilot program for car share that took place in CBs 9 and 11 in Manhattan. This was an initiative that the city council had approved, that DOT was mandated to install, at least as a pilot program, designated locations in certain parts of the city that would act as a pilot program for our car share initiative. So ideally, the purpose behind car sharing is that for those folks that do not have access to a car but want to do things with the car, there would be designated curbside space that's given to one of 3 car share companies, the ones that Debbie had mentioned. And basically, for a fee, there would be cars that are available for trips from the neighborhood or other reasons, with dedicated parking pretty much built in. So those spaces where the cars be located would be the dedicated parking for the car share for those cars. And ideally, it's supposed to, hopefully, if successful, at least, for those that are using it, would alleviate the use of purchasing a car or having a car, because the city essentially is providing you with a car for use. It's a program that we've seen be successful in CBs 9 and 11. This is another program that is being done citywide, so it's not just, in CB 12 or in certain parts of the city. This is also pretty much in every community board citywide as well. So every CB has received similar letters with different locations. And this is also an initiative that hopefully will be used in order to, alleviate and, parking concerns, as well as be a convenience to residents that either can afford a car or don't want to be bothered with parking. They would have the ability to go to certain designated locations within each board, and sign up for our program in order to use those vehicles. So like I said, during the spring, we will be moving forward. But yeah, if there are locations that you have in mind or concerns about certain locations, I can take that back to my colleagues, just like the loading zones. But the idea is to move forward with this in the spring as well.
okay. Yeah, I mean, Jim, and unmute.
Hello. I understand what I'm about to say is probably one of the more ironic things ever said on the planet Earth. But these rideshare spaces benefit the rideshare companies because right now they're paying garages probably, although maybe the garages make money on it. I don't know how the deal works. For the places for these cars to be available. And we're making them available on these spaces on the street for no cost to them. So they're getting this benefit for which we might want to charge them money. Now, the irony, of course, is I'm suggesting we charge money to rideshare companies for what exactly the rest of us who park on the street get for free anyway. But if there's money to be made in these penny pinching times, we should look into that. Thank you.
Hello? Can you hear me? Hello?
We can hear you.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
So I have a bit of concern, especially with the new requests. I know they haven't been approved, but is there any plans for DOT to incorporate or to bring forth some type of residential parking? I think especially like areas like Fort Washington, there's certain places where it's mostly residents, and like Jim brought up a point, we're taking away parking from a lot of our residents. And I know it said earlier in the meeting that outreach was done, but I would love to see what the concerns brought, because with all these new requests and a lot of the metered parking, we're kind of taking away parking from our residents. So is there any plan to introduce residential parking or to look at for a future meeting, Lyle?
As far as I know, there isn't. I know it's a question that's come up quite a bit over the years. Residential parking permits come with their own sets of concerns and issues when it comes to at least how DOT looks at it. I haven't heard anything as far as any considerations or thoughts as to residential parking permits being an option. I can take that back to my colleagues to see if there might be any updates, but I know that at least in the past, when it's been brought up, either by residences or community boards, DOT as a whole has major concerns when it comes to residential parking permits. I don't think that's anything that we would be considering at this time, but I can definitely ask on your behalf if it's something we would consider.
Thank you.
And I
No
think there's a political aspect of, like, I know DOT, like, they're on the policy side, people have concerns. I think that relate to if the demand so outstrips the supply, then you don't have resident parking, you have a resident fishing licenses. And if you really still can't, it's still hard to find a spot, then the program isn't doing what we need it to do. But on the other hand, when the current DOT commissioner was a council person, I think he was very much in favor of this. And I believe that the Manhattan Borough president has also at times talked about this as a potential policy that he would support. So ultimately, it's law that needs to get to establish it. I don't think DOT can establish it on its own. But one would hope that with the design of the program, understanding how serious the demand is, that they could design something that could meet the need. But I guess, Leo, I would only challenge you on the idea that, car shares for residents too. There are, while not you and not me, there are people who are giving up their cars because it's so bad. And it's so costly and they're throwing up their hands and saying like, I'm not doing this anymore. And so, and some people do go this route. Again, for those of us that are pretty much use our cars, I think it's hard to imagine, but sometimes I start to think, oh yeah, maybe I need to think about that because this is insanity. Okay. So, yeah, and personally, I'd like the restaurant sheds out of our streets because I think there are so many competing interests at the curb, and I just think that needs to stop, but I'm not in charge of that decision. Okay. Let me stop the share.
Debbie, I have my hand raised a new time. So like,
oh, okay, go ahead.
I just wanted to comment that the Zip car that's installed across from my office on 112 and Broadway, it had cars in the beginning, but I can't think of the last time I actually saw cars parked and available on 112th and Broadway. There's never any cars there. It has the effect of daylighting, and I kind of think it's nice to daylight the curb, but as far as privatizing public spaces go, I'm with Jim on that. It's like a giveaway to private companies, but we're kind of giving it away to neighborhood people anyway. And I know there's people on this call who that's really important to have that free parking. But the truth of the matter is, for Inwood 134, 80% of people commute to work without a car. Most of the people are not using the car for their commute. It's not pivotal. They're getting to work by foot, and by bike, and largely by public transportation. And those 80% of commuters, like, I just hope that we can spend a bit of time talking about their transportation. We also don't have any bike lanes in Inwood. I mean, we have that short stretch in Dyckman Street, which doesn't connect north-south, which is the direction that most people actually commute to work. So, yeah, I don't like the idea of the private spaces, private companies getting to take over public spaces. The public sheds, the dining sheds is the same thing. It's a giveaway to private companies. So, yeah, thanks.
Okay. So that's kind of what I had for this meeting. I should actually, another update is the Greenway opened. So the only, what we can say is thank God that was brief and that is open for biz again. So next month on the agenda, we have the Wheels Group coming to talk about that initiative that they've been advocating for over a period of time about a potential like closing street near their school, but they haven't visited us in a while, so they will be around. And then we may end up, and I'm not going to go into the backstory of why we may end up, but there has been I don't know, people have seen the proposal for some 5G towers being installed. That could also have gone to Environment Committee, but it will probably take it up in ours just because they were doing a joint meeting their month. So it might be easier just to do it in ours than it is on our like sidewalk. So we really could have gone either way. But I just wanted to see, I mean, I'm going to just sort of take note of Leo's point about, municipal parking and residential parking and that whole topic. But just looking at the committee or, really actually attendees of sort of what you would like to see are the things that we'd like to see on the agenda for this year, things to take up. If anything comes to mind, either speak now or get in touch.
Yes, Debbie, I would I'm sorry, Allegra again. I would very much like to talk about bike lanes in Washington Heights and Edgewood, north of 110th Street. There really just aren't many safe bike lane options. And, you know, south of 110th Street, those communities have a smorgasbord of safe ways to commute by bike or you know, electric wheelchair or electric kick scooter or a variety of other kinds of micromobility devices. And DOT said that they're not even going to start thinking about Inwood until 2027. And that means that, you know, I'll probably be in my 60s by the time I get a safe bike lane in the neighborhood. And I'm not that old right now, but I don't really think that's fair. And I don't think that anybody at Community Board 12 should be happy about the fact that south of 110th Street gets a lot of this really excellent infrastructure upgrades. And those infrastructure upgrades do decrease the amount of traffic fatalities for everybody, not just for cyclists. They decrease it for everybody. They decrease speeding, so there's less speeding of cars, less motor vehicle accidents, less pedestrians killed, less cyclists maimed. And I think that it's not very fair that CB12 has to wait decades after CB 7 gets to have bike lanes, for instance. I'd like to see us bring that up in a rigorous kind of way.
Okay, duly noted. Leo, that's an old hand, right? That you have up? Maria?
Yeah, Debbie, I'm sorry, I'll turn all that.
Listening to the problems that we have parking and so on, and the bike lanes, and you know, how long is that going to take? Someone of my age is not into biking, but anyway, I know everybody and every place, the bike lanes are really being as helpful as in other areas below 110th Street. So we have to be very careful about that. We have a lot of issues in our community, such as millions of cars that are idling that people have in some families, two and three cars, and they're no use, that they are taking space when they should be probably riding the subway like the most of the people. But if the subways and the bus will be free, you would be surprised how many people will give up their car, because then they have access to a free ride going back to the doctor and to work and things like that. So maybe we should look into that issue as opposed to just eliminating or thinking that parking is not going to be, it's going to be a problem forever and ever and ever. So, my idea about bike lanes and things like that, we have to really be very careful. Our streets are not that wide, they are narrow streets, and we are really eliminating some of the areas, for traffic to flow, as opposed to just giving. I'm not talking about 158th Street, that bike lane going from Broadway to the highway is underused. If you see the number of people who are using that bike lane, that should be looked into. Unnecessary, and maybe they could reroute it someplace else. So that's, I have to say that, because it's really, not everybody can use bicycles. And summer and winter here, I just don't know how people go to work when the weather is really bad. So that's what I have to say. I just, I used to ride the bike when I was younger, but no more. All right. So just take a look at the community and the people who live in our communities that will be able to just use bike for their primary way of, transportation.
Well, I think it's a very good point, and I think we're hearing more and more about free buses at very least. Sorry, there's a little background noise. I'm sorry. I'm about to say, do we want to, I think we can get ready to adjourn, but one thing went through my head about one more update about MTA, but it might have fallen out of my brain again. All right. It's gone. Okay. So does anybody have anything else? Anything I'm missing? Oh, I know what it was. Mary Anderson. So Mary had highlighted, and this had come up from other avenues as well. There was a removed bus stop at 193rd Street, St. Nicholas on the M3. Am I saying that right? Yeah. And which means that you're kind of in the worst case scenario, have 4 additional blocks because you have to sort of get off at 189th or between, yeah. Because what the bus is doing right now, this is just on the northbound, is it's making a right on 190th and then continuing up to its terminus at the top of the curve at Fort George Avenue, Amsterdam into Fort George Avenue. And so what's happened there, so I don't think it's going to change, is it's not so much, I think, to MTA's mind, it's not so much that a bus stop has been removed, it's that the bus has been rerouted. And the bus was rerouted because when they did some of the street changes and updates, like that bus, I guess, was doing a U-turn or something. So basically they couldn't do that anymore. And so now it's rerouting and cutting over at 190th, meaning you can't go any further up. I mean, you could take the bus till the very end and get off at the top of Fort George Avenue, but I don't think that really saves you much to 193rd. It's kind of roughly the same distance than getting off the bus before it makes a turn and goes up Amsterdam to its terminus. So unfortunately, it doesn't appear that was just, I thought that it was a temporary thing relating to when they were doing the street update changes on Upper Amsterdam and on 190th, but that is not the case. It's that they needed to eliminate, however that bus was getting turned around, wasn't really possible anymore. So that was the answer on that, unfortunately.
May I comment?
Please.
I'll tell you. What's happening with MTA and the buses and the bus stops, being eliminated so that there's 4 blocks between bus stops rather than 2 blocks as it used to be, is really playing havoc with the disabled and the elderly frail. I'm very sorry, but it's a very prejudicial kind of thing, and we will be fighting about this. I'm going to get a hold of some people associated with disabilities, and the fight will happen because we can't settle for this. We cannot.
And this is going to be, and I know we've said this over and over, but just when the Manhattan bus redesign arises, it will be incumbent on us to, review those things about, that balance between getting buses moving faster, but on the other hand, not creating a situation like we do where it's such a big increase that you really are reducing access in the way that Mary's describing. I don't know when that'll be. I kind of have hopes that by the very end of this year that we'll be kicking off, but we're the last to go. So nobody's really giving us a date as of yet. So, okay, with that, do I have a motion to adjourn?
I make a motion to adjourn.
Thanks, Mary. All right. Well, let's see.
We need a second.
8:18. Yep. Second. Somebody just raise a hand. Anyone?
Bruce.
Jody. Thank you.
And Debbie, you won't forget to send me Lyle's email, right?
I will send it to you as soon as I disconnect.
Okay.
All right, well, great. So I will see everybody next month. Thanks for the great discussion. If anybody comes up with ideas and addresses on the first item, please send them my way or Lyle's way. And Jody, I'll get you the email address right now. Everybody have a good night.
Thanks. Bye, Debbie.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Happy New
Bye.
Year.
Good night, everybody.
Bye.